glad you all got to come and spend the lunch with me. I was just in Gastonia. I was at an IEP meeting there, so I was rushing here to make sure I got to you all on time. So as Karen said, I am the educational advocate and consultant at Southeast Psych, which is a private psychology firm in Charlotte. You all heard of Southeast Psych before? Okay. We have two locations, one's in South Park and one's in Lakeview. And we work with everyone from kids all the way to adults, from everything from assessment to sports psychology to, oh my goodness, groups, parenting groups, social skill groups, all kinds of different things. And so I started with Southeast probably about 3 years ago, and here we go. So I started with Southeast about 3 years ago, and I was a school psychologist in Charlotte Mecklenburg schools for over 7 years. Obviously, I had 2 girls, 2 daughters. My youngest actually has some learning differences. She fell at a young age and hit her head, and so some of what we're dealing with now is some repercussions of that. She's got ADHD, but she also has learning disabilities. So constantly advocating for her, and it's finally found her way to Pell Stage, which has been great. So, like I said, have a specialist degree in school psychology, was a school psychologist in Charlotte Meck, joined Southeast Psych about 3 years ago, and started up their advocacy program there to help a couple of things. One, I'm the liaison between the private clinicians and the schools, so I work very closely with the clinicians when they're doing assessments and helping families take that information and apply it to their children in school. So you get an assessment done and you sit to yourself, now what? What do I do with it? What does it mean? What does it look like at school? So being able to help navigate that situation for families. And then the other piece that I love, and is fairly new, but is helping families find schools that match their children's needs. So if they're in a situation where the school is not a good fit, saying what other schools are out there that can help with that. Yeah. That often comes up in such a topic. Okay, so you all should have a handout. If you don't, I think we certainly can make more. But it's a bunch of handouts, photocopied, some different things that we're going to do throughout the day. I also have emailed my presentation. If you're interested in having that presentation emailed, I believe the list is going around. We can email you my presentation directly to you. Or you can email me the questions. Okay. So, we're talking about a lot of different stuff today. We're going to talk about time management and organization, and then I'm going to talk about study skills and homework tips and some different exercises that we're going to do today. The agenda's on the front of your packet just so that you have an idea as to what's going on. So, I like to start off just talking about time management and organization. Big topic, right? Constantly going on with children. Your students, you're sitting there going, why are they not getting this stuff done? It's frustrating. So we're going to talk a little bit about time management and organization in the sense that, I hate to say this, but girls are typically better at it than boys. So for moms with boys, I'm sorry, but
that's why we're here, right?
Yes. It is a learned skill. It's not necessarily something that is a natural skill for to be organized or to be able to manage your time. But it is learned and it can be taught, so it can happen. Your child can be successful with this. Okay, so it is directly linked to not only current school success, but there have been a lot of studies done on how developing those time management and organizational skills affect later in life. So not just college, but in career someday. Because if you think about it, time management and organization is a life skill. It's something that will stay with you for the rest of your life if you learn the appropriate skills for it. This I thought was actually really interesting. More than half of students feel that they are not comfortable or confident in their time management and organizational skills. They don't feel they have a good system and they're trying to find their way. Middle school is a huge time when this comes about. I advocate, I'd say more than half of my time I'm advocating for middle schoolers on this topic. I work a lot with kids with Asperger's. That's just one of my specialties, and kids with autism. And so one thing with children with Asperger's, executive functioning, which are those organization and time management skills, are typically fairly weak. So when you get to middle school, as you can imagine, they're switching classes, you have larger workloads, you've got more responsibilities. For those of you who have middle schoolers, you're very familiar with this. And so if you have a child that struggles with this anyways, and then you put them in this environment, it's that much more difficult. So it's just helping them feel confident in building the skills. This is also a time, like any life skill you're going to teach your child, you have to allow them to make mistakes. But it's got to be done in a way that's not negative. They've got to learn from their experience. So of course kids are going to make mistakes in the organization, or maybe they'll forget to write something down in their agenda. They're going to have to figure that out, but you just have to be more of that coach, guiding them or giving them suggestions on what they could maybe do differently to help. Okay, when we talk about time management and organization, the goal is working on self-discipline and how to teach your child how they can manage their time as an individual. So it's developing that independence, which comes at different times for kids. So you've got to, as parents, you know your kid better than anybody else. So you've got to gauge where they are with that independence level. But they're going to have to, our goal is to get them in that direction. And like anything, we are their role models. So as much as possible, if we can demonstrate some good organizational strategies. I'm not saying everyone's going to be perfect at this, and you need to be perfect at it. But if you can model, okay, well, for example, with me, I'm a list maker. I have to write lists. If I don't have a list, it's gone. My youngest is just like that. She's now starting to realize that, okay, lists help her because it's a visual cue, it's a visual reminder of something that she's got to do. I'm not always good at it. But instead of beating myself up over it, I use it as a teaching tool. So if I make a mistake in something I'm doing, I then demonstrate that to my kids and say, oh, Mom, I forgot to write that down. It's okay, we'll do it next time. So you have to model that along with whatever it is works for you. Because oftentimes, one of your children is going to be somewhat similar or have similar strengths in whatever area that you need, like the list like I was talking about. Okay, so your first handout, I did not number them, I apologize. So just past the agenda, your first handout. Can I have a volunteer to come up here? Okay. We're on the list maker, and I use that as my example. That's what works for me, right? But what I'm going to demonstrate through this activity, this is an activity that you can do, an exercise that you can do with your child. And this one in particular helps demonstrate to children why it's important to write something down, especially an agenda for homework. And we're going to demonstrate that in just a minute, okay? Make a mistake. Okay. How many people in this room are list makers or like it? All right. This is great. All right. Do you make grocery lists? What about when you go for a trip? Making lists for a trip? Or something throughout the day. You've got different activities. I know with my meetings, I don't write them down. I got to make sure where I'm going because I'm traveling all over the place. So I need to make sure I know what school I'm going to. Okay. I'm going to give you a list of instructions that I'm going to say to you. And I want you to follow them or answer whatever it is.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Probably not.
Say your first and last name out loud.
Sarah Hayes.
What is 2 + 2?
4.
Raise your right hand. Say and remember the following words. 3, bed, arm, and 7.
3, bed, arm, and 7.
Oh, hop 3 times. Clap your hands. Say a word that rhymes with cat.
Cat.
What is your favorite movie?
Goonies.
Touch the top of your head. Touch your feet. Turn around 3 times. Put your hands by your side. What are the words I asked you to remember?
3. Cat. Cat.
Awesome. What I'm wanting to demonstrate is that's often what goes on if you think about it, you're in the classroom, there's a lot of information coming at you, right? All the time. And then it's like, here you go, let's go, you know. And now write down your homework. Now, I'm not saying this doesn't have to be. I'll say it does a great job with this. But most schools I go into, and most of my kids I advocate for, agenda is #1 priority. My kids are not bringing home their homework. My kids do not know what their homework is. They did not write their homework down, and therefore when they get home they don't remember it. Well, you can't remember it in 2 minutes. Are you going to remember it hours after you've been through school into how many classes? So what I'm saying is, if that's where it's kind of teaching your child, giving them an example of how important it is to write it down. Just this little exercise is great to do with your children. To say, see, this is what I'm talking about. This is why it's important to write in your agenda or write your assignments down. A lot of what I do too, especially with the upper grades, I'm starting to have kids now with all these smartphones and technology, as long as it's okay with their school, they can take a picture of the board in their class, and they can either email it to themselves or email it to their parent, but they have an immediate picture recognition, so they're not having to write it down. So for my kids who struggle with writing it down, they just have to take a picture and they're done. So that sometimes is important. There's little strategies to help out with some of this. But why I wanted to do this activity is just to show you. If we as adults can struggle with that type of activity, so can kids. And that's where it's so important to be able to work on some of these and do some activities or exercises. Here's some additional exercises that I've come up with. A homework chart. There's one in there. There's tons of samples of homework charts, and you can make your own. For example, you could do it each day. You could do it Monday through Friday and say, okay, here's what the schedule is going to look like. Here's what you need to get done every night. Or, for example, what especially with my younger daughter, she needs to study a little every night, whether there's a test the next day or not. She has got to study a little every night. So it's chunking the material down into smaller bits. So if you've got a child that can benefit from that, a homework chart is great. It gives you a visual. Let's practice making your homework chart. Let's do it together so we can have a visual that can help you. An afternoon schedule. This can, not just afternoon, morning schedule, an afternoon schedule. I've got a lot of kids who struggle with what they need to do before they get out the door in the morning. Do they brush their teeth? Do they pack, do they have their lunch? Do they have their snacks? Do they have their water bottles? Do they have there's a lot of stuff they gotta remember. So sometimes just a little checklist for them to remember in the morning. You can laminate it so they can just look at it and put a check if they need to and erase it. And the same for the afternoon. What is your schedule like in the afternoon? Do they need to come home immediately and start homework, or are they allowed to snack and then homework? Have a schedule and have it somewhere where the kids can see it so it's consistent and you know what's going on and your child knows what's going on. This was a big one. You hear so much about this, but keep track of that screen time, the amount of time that they're on electronics. This also helps them gauge time. So if you have them kind of clock in and clock out, so for example, you say, okay, what time did you get on your electronic? Let's just mark that down. You're getting them to notice time. And then what time did you get off? Okay, well, how much time were you on? Well, maybe you were on 30 minutes. That's what 30 minutes looks like. So you're getting them used to, even through things that they enjoy, used to time. Getting them the concept of how long 30 minutes is, how long 15 minutes is. You're getting them trained to get used to thinking about time. Now in school they're getting time because they're in different classes, right? So they're used to have to switching classes. But it's often habit. They just go when all the other kids go sometimes. They're not noticing really time. So these are just some activities you can help with. I did mention this, how much time do your kids need to get ready in the morning? By middle school we should, I don't know about anybody else, but it seems to be taking a lot longer to get ready in the morning with my middle schoolers. And we're a uniform school. So I'm not quite sure what's taking so long, and we put the outfit out the night before. So just some of that time is going to change, but gauge that and say, okay, what do you think? Do you need an hour? Can you get ready in 30 minutes? What does that look like? And keep a consistent schedule as much as possible. This one I've actually started doing. My older one still likes to have us come wake her up, which wish that would happen, but setting alarm. Have the kids get in the habit of setting their own alarm. So they're looking at the clock, they're seeing the clock, they see the time, and they're also involved in, okay, I'm getting up at this time, I have to leave the house at this time. This is 45 minutes or an hour, however much time you need. But you're getting them in the habit of taking notice of time through all of these things as well.
Just make sure they turn it off when you don't
True.
have school on Fridays.
Absolutely, that is true. Yes. So see, as a mom, you have to be organized. You have to remember that might be a list, that might be a note somewhere. Turn off the alarm, right? You're right. You're right. Or I've got multiple alarms going off throughout the day, and all of a sudden what is that? She set 2 alarms instead of 1. But anyways, but that's a great habit to get into, and kids can, at any age, can really start setting the alarms. You know, if you teach them how to do it and walk them through it and why we do this, and then checklists. You can have a checklist for anything. But especially if you're visual and you need a visual cue, a visual reminder, checklists are huge. I work with my middle schoolers. In some schools, they have the big binder, which gets a little heavy throughout the day. But often what I'll do is have the parents and the student develop a checklist that stays in their binder, it's laminated, so that for every class they have all their materials and they just have to check it. Do I have this, 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 and this? What's so nice here is it's being such a small environment, there's not this stress of forgetting something. Most larger middle schools, there's a lot of stress with that. So sometimes kids would need just a little visual checklist as a reminder of what they need. Okay, so here are just some tips when it comes to time management and organization. So we talk about your child's learning style. Raise your hand if you've heard that before. What's learning style? Okay. What I mean by that is, are they a visual learner? Are they an auditory learner? Need to hear it. Are they one of those kinesthetic where they have multiple, they need to touch it, feel it? Do they need a variety of different methods coming in? So you want to make sure that what you're providing your child goes along with the type of child that they are, the learner that they are. So if I, for example, with my younger child, who is a visual learner, if I bark orders at her, is she going to get anything I'm saying to her? Probably not. Plus she's got some ADHD stuff too. So it's going in and right out. So that is not a good tool for her. So that's where those checklists are great for her. When she studies, she uses index cards. It's a visual. She needs a visual to study. So if I were to just rote memorization with her and just not have her have any visual cue, she's going to struggle and she's not going to be successful because that's not her learning style. Does that make sense? What we're talking about. Sometimes.
So I've heard of the different learning styles, but I'm not sure that I know
Exactly
what we are. So we would just try a couple of these and see if we're doing much better now that Molly can look at the picture of a picture maybe because she's in kindergarten. So a picture of a toothbrush, a picture of your shoes.
Yep. And a lot of that is going to be some trial and error. Another great contact are your teachers, because they're in the classroom with them. So they see them and they see what they're gravitating toward when they're in that classroom. But you're right. I mean, so it's, okay, the pictures seem to work and she's able to follow along with those visual cues with different things you got going on, then that's a great tool. Now, if she needs a picture versus words, there's a variety of different things that you can do, and you're going to get a list of different things in that packet as well. So it is some trial and error, and also just watching, for example, especially now when they're getting to middle school, they are becoming much more independent. Really starting in that 3rd and 4th grade, their responsibilities are starting to pick up. So they're starting to have to do a lot more on their own. What I love is the fact that with homework, it's much more hands-off, that the child is to do it independently, which is really what it's for, is to reinforce. If they have a question, it's their responsibility to ask the teacher the next day. So it's not as if the parents are in there saying, well, you did this, you didn't get this right, you didn't, do that right. that's helping foster that independence in your children. And so it's finding out, okay, when they're studying or when they're doing homework, what are they gravitating toward? Do they ask you to repeat when they study, or ask you to work on grammar or vocab or spelling words? How do they like to do it? Do they like you just to quiz them? Do they like to do games on the computer using their spelling words? There's several different programs that you can do that. Do they like to write their spelling words in different colors? So there's all different ways to say, okay, I think my child seems to be more visual or auditory based on what you're seeing.
And we'll send out families just so we have some great little checklists that you could, to determine your child's learning style so that you can have it. We'll just, now that that's come out, we'll send it out.
There's a million resources too online. There's all these little parent inventories you can do online, websites that explain each of the different multiple intelligences. And yeah, there's good resources out there now.
So along with your child's learning style, some kids need timers or clocks to keep them on track, when they're doing homework. You set the timer and say, okay, this should take you about 20 minutes, or this should take you about, and set the clock at that time. If they need extra time, then is it because they were zoning out and they weren't focused, or they were struggling on a problem and whatever. So there's all kinds of, sticky notes are big. A lot of kids will use that. Highlighters, do they like to see, use the highlighters to underline? Okay, so you want to make sure that you're using the right management tool. Do they do best with a planner or an agenda? I actually bought both of my kids, and this is me forcing it on them, not anything else, but I've gotten my kids over the years in the habit of using an agenda, and one that they can write in to keep track of their homework. That just seems to work. They're used to doing that. There's a variety of different styles. There's one place called Uncalendar that is completely empty. You start the dates, you handwrite the dates in, and there's big spaces. It's not already done for you, which is nice if you need if you have a child who wants to put it in there. You can organize it and set it up, and there's a lot of space to write. So you're just figuring out. There's computer apps now that they can keep track of their calendars right on their computers. A lot of schools are going in that direction now with iPads, that they use the Google Calendar to put in their homework. So there's a lot of different things out there that they can use. It's just figuring out what your child likes and trying some things and seeing how it works. A lot of it too is just being consistent. You got to give it some time to try different strategies. This one, establishing those daily routines and being as consistent as possible.
Can I go back to that
Sure.
consistent thing? Because I'm speaking as a mom, not a head of school, very consistent as a head of school. It is a challenge for me with that consistency. So I'm great for organizing charts and having things up in my house. And Lori's just saying she copied one that we haven't used for 2 years, but it's still there. And I'm great at that, but the consistency piece, like how long before it takes for them to be consistent in looking at it? Or to...
It does depend on the child. I mean, it really does. Because basically what you're doing is you're wanting them to form a habit.
Right.
Where they're not thinking about doing it.
Right.
It's probably taken, this is, starting last year, I've done the calendars with the agendas with my kids. Last year, it took a little bit more prodding of let's do this, keep going, and now I don't talk to them about their agenda. They keep up with it, they write in it, because they've seen the success in being able to keep track of it. And that it's their responsibility. If they've forgotten an assignment, it's because they didn't write it down. So you're connecting the consequence to that. And mainly because they don't want to disappoint. Which is great, which is awesome. And that's a lot of what it is too, is the relationship that they have with that. But you want to I definitely stick with, I don't know if there's a specified amount of time to stick with something, but if you're feeling like, okay, we've been doing this for a really long time and it's not sticking, then maybe that's not quite the tool. The kids now with these iPads, with their computer apps for calendars, maybe that's easier. Or maybe taking a picture of the board with the homework. Maybe that's an easier strategy for kids. As long as a cell phone is allowed, or smartphone, they can take it out to snap a picture of the homework, but they have to put their phone away. So it's trying those different things. And if they're able, and with these kids now on these phones, if they're not, I mean, they're on their phones, it seems like all the time. So if they had a picture in their phone, it's there, it's available to them. So there's no excuse why they don't have it. And unless they deleted it or something. But so I'd stick with it and try it. But also you want to have you've got to talk with your child about getting feedback from them. Do they like whatever tool you're using? If they don't like it, why don't they like it? Why are they not buying into it? Because that's technically what you're doing. It's having them buy into whatever strategy you're going to do. So you can tweak it and try new things and say, okay, we're going to put it in place for this amount of time, 6 weeks or whatever. We're going to try this strategy for 6 weeks, and I really want you to give it your all. And then we can come back and we can see how it works.
Is it important in an agenda for them to write down if they have homework or not in a specific subject? Like consistency that way? Because sometimes like math, you always have math homework. Sometimes you don't have homework in another. And I'm having an issue with my son. Language arts, you have homework? No homework, whatever. And I don't know if
So if it's being blank and you're not sure if it means that he forgot to write down or
if they're, I don't know if it's too much for him to write down. If he just needs to write down what to do, and then that's it, or write down homework.
So I get in the habit with my girls of trying to get them to write everything down because it's just a good habit to be in. However, I do have some kids where I've done pre-made checklists that I taped into their agendas and that has every subject on it with any possible item they may need. So they need a textbook, they may need a notebook, they may need a folder, and they're just boxes. So all they would have to do is math, check, just a check, that's it. And you just make one version of it, but then you can print it off as many times as you want. And you can make different sizes, you can do it for that. But what you do is you go through each subject area and say what would be the possible materials they would need in social studies, what would be the possible materials they need in math. And then that's all there. So it's cutting down on the writing. But the only thing would be is if they need the page number, they would just have a little line that says page number. So that's been helpful for some of my kids too, where it's the actual writing of it, of getting everything down. And your kid may benefit from taking a picture too, if that's a possibility. I mean, there's definitely a bunch of different strategies.
Right on the wall, they always have the homework right on the board, and it's their responsibility to write it down. They do or they don't. But, we're trying to be consistent on what is due and what's not, because I don't believe bringing enough homework home, period.
Okay.
So, and we've already had conferences with teachers, so we know students are just a matter of them bringing it home.
Right.
And writing it down as agenda, what exactly to do.
Yes, and I think, and it's tricky sometimes to teach, and I hear this a lot, that teachers, or parents will say, well, the teacher switches the homework that day, and it switches. They may put it on their website on Sunday, and it switches during the week, so that's hard to keep up with. And that does come up a lot too. But I think it's just a matter of how much you can reduce the actual writing to take that piece away. So you don't want to enable and do everything for your son, because he's got to have to figure out how to do it. But it's a matter of figuring out what system would work. So if like a pre-made checklist would work, taking a picture would work, having it just written out, it depends. I mean, if there's a way you could get the homework for the week before, and if there's a change, he would just have to write the change in.
Yeah, some of these teachers don't keep up on their weekly though.
Those wiki pages kill me.
Yeah, so I don't want to go get in the habit of looking those all the time. Too.
No, because they don't always stay with those.
Yeah,
So it is a struggle. So it's just trying to figure out how you can reduce as much of that, but stay on top of as much as possible with what's going on. Yeah, and it's just maybe going to each individual teacher and saying, okay, what would be the most that you could have to take home, or what materials, and making sure that piece is done, and then working with the teachers to say what are they willing to allow him to do to reduce it. Okay. Schedule time for homework as well as studying in any calendar that you create. You have to put that in there. So if you've got a child who needs to study every day, that should be in your schedule every afternoon, that's what they're doing. We mentioned earlier, you're coaching that self-discipline. You're working with them to have that self-discipline so that they can carry that on when they're older. This is a big one. Managing that sleep and their energy level, making sure they have a good breakfast, making sure they're going to bed at a reasonable time and as consistently as possible. I mean, I know there's things that happen. We've got just as busy schedules, things come up throughout the week. I totally get that. But know that if you've had a late night during the week, maybe bump the bedtime up a little earlier than the next night so that they can just get back into some semblance of a routine as much as possible. Okay, here's some more tips. You're going to go to the second handout, so it's just past the list maker. This is probably for little ones. I don't know if middle schoolers would want to do it sometimes, but you want to make a plan. So, what's their plan for? I mean, out here in middle school we have lockers, but what's the plan for their book bag? Do you want to clean it out once? Do you want to have your child clean it out once a week? Should they be cleaning it out daily? What does that look like? You know, I mean, because I know one of the biggest things that comes up is, okay, my child's book bag has all these papers in it. I don't know where they belong. They're shoved at the bottom of the bag. What do I do? This is a nightmare, especially when you're a parent who's maybe a little bit more organized. So set a plan with your child to say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to, every Friday or whatever, you're going to sit down, you're going to pull everything out of your bag, and you're going to clean it out. If your kids are like my two, the entire locker comes home every day. Oh my goodness, what do you have in here? You're gonna break your back. So it's just going through, let's start, do you need to bring this item home every night? You know, kind of walking through, what's that plan going to be? The same could be for their desk or your study zone. I call this study zone. Your study zone at home. Make sure you have a clear space where they can study and they can work. What is that going to look like? What materials will they need in that area? And that kind of thing. Okay, another one, and I keep this at my house. My husband keeps trying to put papers on the top of it, so it kind of defeats the purpose of why I have it. But I get one of those big desk calendars so that I can see them a month. Because I think it's not just daily or weekly, but if you can have a full vision of what your month is going to look like, especially with kids with projects, longer term projects, and we'll get to this in a little bit. It's good to have a visual of what's going on and what your upcoming month or the next couple of weeks are going to look like. Because as we know, we have crazy schedules. And so it's just good for them to kind of know ahead of time, especially if a kid who maybe struggles a little bit with transition or change. It's good for them to see what's coming up. So you're prepping them ahead of time. I'm sorry, I just briefly went over that handout too. That's just an example of some questions you can ask about making a plan for different areas. Just a little handout I threw in. Okay, you've got a child. I think this is good, honestly, for any kid to study a little every night. The cramming, you want to get them into good habits, good time management, good study skills that will carry them through. I mean, some kids are great crammers. I'm not. So I would have to regularly study. But it's good for kids to get in that routine anyways, because as the homework and they get higher in the grades, the homework's going to get more and the responsibility is going to get more. So they need to learn how to chunk it themselves. And that's a good way to start having them do that. Okay, the next two handouts. One is called Long-Term Project Planner, and I think the other one is called Over the Long Haul. Okay, I use these a lot. I particularly use the Long-Term Project Planner for my kids. Clients, but I use it for my kids too. And basically what you're doing is you're taking any kind of project that you may have and chunking it down. And it's, again, a visual aid. It's showing them, here's what you need to be doing at this time. When it's due, they can check it off. It gives them a sense of accomplishment because they're able to see that what they've been doing. I have a lot of teachers that would use this as well on projects, and they may have had their own version. Oftentimes teachers come up with their own version of the long-term project planner. But you can use it for anything. If there's something going on at home, you can just sit down and you set your dates and you look at what's reasonable, what should they be getting done in such an amount of time. And then the other handout is Over the Long Haul. It's the same thing, it's just a different version of how to chunk bigger projects down to smaller pieces. They can circle if they've completed it or not. So it's getting them in the habit of taking those lists if they need it. This is where it's helpful when you're figuring out learning style too. Do these things, or strategies. does your child seem to benefit? Is your child liking doing a long-term project planner or some kind of visual? Does it seem to keep them on task more getting it done? So you can, if these are some ways to gauge and say, okay, this tool really worked. Let's keep doing this. So it's going to give you the opportunity to kind of see how your kids react. Okay. A use of a contract or a checklist, or however you want to call it, to manage organization, and that's the next handout. This is one you can change it around. You can. This is one that I would use with my students. This is just an example. Back when I was in school psychology, or as a school psychologist, I had hundreds of versions of they're basically behavior checklists. But it also could be for academic, it could be for homework, it could be for whatever you need. You're just setting up a little chart, and you're being consistent to say, okay, did you turn in your homework? Did you complete your homework or assignment? Do it for however you want. And then it's a little checklist. It's a little a way for students to monitor. For the little ones, you're monitoring them. You're checking them to say, did you do this? Did you do that? With older ones, we can start moving on. They're monitoring themselves. They should be able to handle this on their own without you having to. Did you fill out your chart? Did you do this? But they should. It's getting them in the habit of checking themselves, making sure that they're completing their work, they're organized, they're using their time wisely, and you can adapt it to however you need it and change it. Okay. Practice, practice, practice. All of these things that I've talked about so far, you just have to practice them. It's going to take time, and Karen mentioned it too. It's going to take time. Every child is going to be different, and how long it takes them to get into the routine of doing whatever tool you're choosing. But you've got to practice them and do it with them. Yes?
I have a question on managing sleep and energy along with the homework and the time management. We come to the end of the night, we're still working on homework, it is time to go to bed. This is where the problem comes
Then
into play.
you need to shut down. If it's taking that long, it should not take that long. When I'm in meetings, when I'm at schools, and when I advocate, I'm everywhere. I'm South Carolina, North Carolina, it's wherever. So across the board, this is consistent that I say. If a child is struggling and they're doing hours upon hours of homework a night, it's defeating the purpose. We're undoing everything that they would have just done. There's no point in forcing a kid to struggle like that, because what is it doing? Is your child frustrated?
Yeah.
Okay. Is he starting to lose the passion, or she, in school with some of that?
No, but I can tell that it reduces his ability to want to learn it because he just feels frustrated that it takes him so long to do that.
So it's defeating the whole purpose. Yeah. So this is where I say to parents, if it's taking that long for your child to complete homework, I get homework, I understand it because it's part of life, but at the same point, it's got to be directed for what it's supposed to be used for. And I think at times when we get into a lot of these schools, it's busy work. You know, you get a lot of these projects that become parent projects. Parents are doing it. That's not the point. We've been through school. They should be at an instructional level, not a frustrational level for kids. And if they don't get it when they're working on it at night, then they're not going to get it, because oftentimes they've lost it because they've gotten so frustrated with whatever it is they're working on. So my recommendation is, and this is where I've done it before, is I will have parents write on the homework, child spend X amount of time, we are shutting down, and I would talk to teachers and saying, okay, what is a reasonable amount of time your child should be working on homework? Anything above that, we need to stop. And so that would be where you talk with their individual teacher to say, okay, come up with a reasonable amount of time they should be spending. 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. I don't know how old your child is, but anything above that, you have their permission to write on there. We're done. Because that to me is just totally detrimental to the child.
It's helpful to the teacher too, that if they're not mastering the material in the classroom, if you're doing the homework or you're making them spend hours and they don't think he's spending hours.
Absolutely.
Again, it's that communication, I think, between both parent, student, and teacher that is so vital
Absolutely.
to the success.
And that's where a lot of times, if it's a situation where the child is really struggling to pay attention, that's great information. Homework time is, they're shut down at that point. They've spent so much time focusing during the day. That's really good information to give to your teacher. So we're struggling because my child's not paying attention, or we're struggling because it seems like my child doesn't have that concept. We need to reiterate that concept. So that is absolutely good communication, or good observations, and all good things to then relay to your teachers to say, this is what's going on. Okay? Sorry.
What is your feeling on the opposite then? What about a child who maybe doesn't have these good practices in place, and at 8 o'clock goes, oh, by the way, I've got homework. And then you're past bedtime. Do you still shut them down? You didn't finish your time, so we're done?
There's got to be consequences to it. And again, they're going to have to figure out if they're, and I just had this with my other daughter, which that was not a good conversation in my house.
Not mine either.
She's trying to go down the road of I study better at night. Not going to work. And she does, I think, a little bit. That's her learning style, even though it's not my learning style. I think that's where that schedule when they first come home is so important, and having it visual. And if they're taking time not getting done what they're supposed to do, what are they doing in place? What are they doing to distract themselves from getting their assignments done? And I think what's so important is setting that routine. And I should have stressed it more when we talked about it. But setting the routine when they come home, what does that look like? When my kids come home, they grab a snack and they immediately start homework. And that's been my routine from day, unless it's some odd thing that's come up. But that is my routine. Because if I go any longer than that, my younger one is not going to do anything. Because at that point, with her attention, we're done. She's not anything past dinner time. I'm not going to get anything out of her. So I have to be very rigid and very routine with her. But again, you do. I mean, there's got to be some consequence to say, okay, here's the things I put in place. Here's our schedule. Here's what you were a part of developing that schedule. Here's the expectations and the responsibilities. If you're coming to me at 8 o'clock, then you've gone against our contract of what's going to be. And it may be that you set a contract up with your child and say, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to draw up a contract that states this is what you're supposed to do when you come home from school. And then everybody signs it. So that when you get to that point, you said, now you've gone against what we agreed. So now you're going to have a consequence of not getting your stuff done. Because they've got to learn to be able to do that. And they have to be independent. And I think what's hard for us as parents is we want to fix everything. We want to do it for them. That's probably one of the worst things that you can do, because it's not teaching them independence. It's teaching them that they have somebody else that will fix it. So it's not problem solving. We're not developing independent skills. And I know that sounds really, really harsh to say, but research is out there. It's very, very true. If you want to teach your child to be independent and good problem solvers and critical thinkers, you've got to let them make the mistakes. If your child forgets their lunch, don't bring their lunch to school. They're not going to starve. And they definitely will not starve here. I got a phone call just last week from my older child who didn't check the calendar, that's there, didn't pack her lunch, so calls me hysterical because she didn't have lunch. And my response to her was, did you check the calendar? No. Well, I'm in a client. You need to figure it out. And that's how I left it. I mean, I was validating. It wasn't that nasty, but that sounds hard. I wasn't that, I validated and I gave her that,
I hate that you forgot your line.
yes, I did the love and logic. That's what I did. I'm really sorry that you're upset right now, and I'm really sorry that you forgot your lunch, but you're going to have to figure this one out. And she won't forget her lunch again.
And it was hard.
That's
I
just-
think it's fair to say, it's hard to do as a parent, but it's the right thing.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what, so
Yeah.
like, why call us then, in a way?
Sometimes they need that. They just need to hear your voice for you to say it's okay.
Can't do anything.
No, I know. But they
always
test,
that hope they can like.
they test limits. They're constantly testing you.
Yeah.
They're constantly testing you all the time. All the time. But they've got to figure it out. And I keep using my kids as an example, and I apologize, but they were at Camp Thunderbird, and they both forgot, this was summers ago, forgot their swimsuits. I'm working. I'm not bringing you swimsuits. So I'm sorry, I'm not coming to get, not. And actually my kids wouldn't call me. The director called me and I said, well, I guess they're gonna have to improvise. And they did. And they went swimming in their clothes. Fine. That's problem solving. That's critical thinking. That's fine with me. But I'm not gonna come fix it. So again, that's the same situation in this. You've gotta let them fall a little bit. They're gonna learn from those mistakes. The next handout is a long list, and I'm not going to go through all of those. I've touched on some. But it's a long list of just different organizational tips and strategies, not just for time management and organization, but I believe there's some homework tips and study skills in there as well. And I know we're close for time, so I'm going to try to, sorry. Okay, we're going to quickly go over some homework and study tips. This is your next handout after that long list. Okay, here's just some basic tips, and it goes into more detail on your handout. But remove distractions during homework and study time as much as possible. TVs off. Some kids like music, to listen to music. That's okay, as long as it's not interfering with what they're doing. Establish a routine. Like we talked about this a lot. This is like, I should have been putting this in like bold, bright yellow. Routine is so important as much as possible. Be consistent. So if they need to study every night, what does that look like? How much time? What's the routine in the afternoon? Establish a workspace, a study zone. Where do you want them to do homework? Are they kids that go and sit in their beds and do homework there? Do you have a table, a kitchen table? Do you have a desk for them to sit? What does that look like? And what's going to be in that zone, study zone, that they're going to need? And I'll tell you about that. I'm going to give you a tip for that. Prioritize. I keep using my kids, I apologize, but sometimes I'm just an example person. My older one loves projects. Very creative, loves to draw, color, all that stuff. So of course she wants to prioritize that and do all the projects first, even though they may be due 3 weeks down the road. No. What is due tomorrow? What's due the next day? What does that look like? That's where that project planner may be helpful, to space that out. I'll let you work on your project a little bit, but you've got to get these other things done first. Okay, so prioritize. Check for understanding. Do they know what they're supposed to do? That's a big one, because sometimes when kids will come home, I have no idea what I'm going to do, especially if they're not writing it down. They're not going to know what they're going to do. Guide them, don't correct them. So if they're doing homework and you see they've made a mistake on their homework, let there be a mistake. Don't correct it. I know we all want to correct, especially with their writing. Let them make the mistakes. They've got to learn from them. Okay? And then get organized for tomorrow. Pack up the night before. Do they have all their materials back in their bag? Do they have everything ready to go?
Darci, I know I'm talking about my children a lot too, but we actually just started recently, because it is true, the developmental brain of a middle schooler their brain starts to focus on other things, so they do developmentally forget a lot. And it's frustrating to them as well. So if you have middle schoolers or high school age, that's fairly standard. Not that I get that all the time as a mom. My husband and I are always like, how could you forget that? You go to horseback riding every single day. How could you forget it, right? But now we've started this new thing of before you go to bed, do you have everything and is it packed in the car? Like, so we've taken it a step further, because in the morning, they don't like to get up. And so, which is also natural, they like to sleep in. As middle schoolers, they actually say they should sleep in longer in the morning. But so that has helped a lot for any of you who are still dealing with that, is to make them actually walk it out and put it in the car.
Especially when they have after school activities, that extra bag they have to bring. That's huge. I know, like our system is their backpacks go in the chairs where they eat breakfast. So they're going to sit on their backpacks. If, when they're there, that's it's a reminder, because you're going to sit on it. But yes, especially like any after school activity bags, go through that, have everything out. I even do uniform pick. I pick out everything the night before, because I'm so tired of, I don't have gym shorts. Well, we should have done that the night before. So getting into those routines, those habits that work for you. Okay, Here's some other tools. A lot of these we've already talked about, so some of them are a repeat, so I apologize. But planner or agenda, if that works well for your child. A daily homework planner, that is your next handout in your list. It's just one that's put together. It's a little bit more intricate, but it's just shows you an example of what you could do if you need a homework planner, and how you can, again, keep a list or a checklist for them so that they're making sure they get everything done. We've talked about that long-term project planner, and that over the long haul, those different ways that you can break down those bigger projects. Do your kids benefit from flashcards to study? What does that look like? How do they prefer to study? Flashcards are a big one. I always have index cards. I know Miss Isla has a slew of them in her room. She may mention that. Or Post-it notes. If they need just a reminder, a Post-it note is a good one, or highlighters. And I mentioned highlighters, a quiz buddy at home. My girls often quiz each other, or they're wanting one of us, my husband and I, to quiz them at night before they go to bed and in the morning. So making sure, like, what does that look like when they're quizzing and working on studying? Okay, now I just put in some resources for you, some good books. Smart but Scattered, if you've ever heard of that. Organizing the Disorganized Child. These are ones that I use and I used to use when I was working. Yes, they are ADHD books, but they've got really good suggestions and ideas for helping with the attention, the organization, strategies, and things like that. I also went ahead, if you have any interest in getting on our website, southeastpsych.com, there's all kinds of stuff going on. We actually just had a huge conference on Friday. We do it twice a year. It's free. It runs from 9 to 3. There's about 20 of us that speak and present on all different topics. Our next one will be in the spring, usually, I would say it's normally May. So we usually do one in October and one in May, but I will make sure that the information is here. And we also do our assessments here. We have a bookstore on site at both locations. We have our own Southeast Psych studios where we film all of our shows. They run on YouTube. So there's all kinds of information that we offer for free on YouTube. We also have our own publishing company where we publish our books that clinicians write. There's a lot of stuff going on there. We have blogs, we have podcasts. There's so many things going on at our organizations. There's always something new. I'm also going to be a part of another brand. We have, over 10 brands right now of different topics. We are going to be launching what they call Aspire. That's our brand name. That is for kids with Asperger's and autism. We're going to be doing all kinds of resources for kids with Asperger's and autism. But if you go on our website, you can see our brands, you can see all of us, learn more about what we're doing, get free resources, more than you can imagine right on site. If you have any questions, my email is on. You should have my email. If not, I'll give it to you again. But it's dcarter@southeastpsych.com. If you have any questions about anything, thank you. All right, can I rush them again?